So the mystery was finally solved. But the final crucial, exciting part is that the guy who owned the house, who was renovating the pub, who lived there since 1952 and in 2010 decides to renovate the pub, and that's how we found the skull, was... And that's how he solved their murder.
Oh my gosh, so random. Why was he there?
Because he lived in this really nice posh area, which what's now become a really nice posh area of London.
Wow. I forgot that you said there was going to be a surprise celebrity.
Yes.
This is a Main Hustle Media podcast.
Virtual Reality Studios. A new realm of creativity.
Everybody, welcome to Matcha and Masala. This is episode 2, Blended Besties Spill the Tea. I am one of your co-hosts, Sharmane Fury, aka the Blazing Blurred. I am a Black Japanese British American currently living in Mexico, and I am joined by my co-host on this show. Ooh,
I'll be Masala.
Hands go that way.
We got it. We
did it.
Yeah, hi, I am Rhia Kaur, and I am AKA, because I'm going to steal that, Mixed Race Mama, and you can find me on all my corners of the internet delivering my trademark mixed bestie energy, where I commiserate and celebrate all it is to be mixed, but we are not just mixed people, we exist as other things too, and that's what we're doing here today. Thanks.
So we are just a couple of mixed mates musing over matcha, masala, and murder. And we decided to get together on this podcast to just chat about all kinds of things that interconnect us as people. And we hope you all enjoy it too. This is our second episode. We had a blast last time. Yep. And this time it's going to be your turn to tell a murder story. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you a question. So you and I are both mixed race podcasters. We have two separate shows. I host Militantly Mixed, a podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. You host Mixed Race Mama, which is a compilation of both your Instagram talks and your podcast, your short form podcast, where you cover topics and things usually. I'm talking to like individual mixed people about them being mixed, and you cover topics, which really cross the gamut of possible things that we can do as mixed folks. But one thing that I always kind of struggle with Militantly Mixed, and I can't tell if it's because I'm a resistant American. I have the influences of a British grandmother, Japanese grandmother, my family's all over the world and things like that. And while I do love to celebrate heritage and culture, I really struggle with the history months or the heritage months that we have in the US, because the way it's done is really kind of arbitrary, or like, oh, we forgot about that group. Let's throw them all together into one, like Asian American and Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian month. Like keep tacking them on. Like it's just, so I feel kind of weird celebrating them. And then I also feel weird not acknowledging them. And in addition to those days, and I know the UK also has history months and things like that as well. In addition to that, there's also things like Coming Out Day, which at the day that we're recording, National Coming Out Day in the United States is, a day to acknowledge queerness and try to help people come out in safety. And I think recently there was the mental health and suicide prevention days as well. So all these days, I don't know what the hell to do with them. But I also want to know, like, does the community need people like us to be acknowledging these types of things? So I know it has nothing to do with tea, has nothing to do with anything else. But since we're both mixed folks and it's kind of on my mind.
I'm with you.
What do you think?
Well, yeah. So I feel like it was always seen as possibly a bit of an American situation in the past. And they definitely are creeping in here. I mean, we've had Black History Month for few years now, you know, that has been going on. And then we've gathered more. Like every year I get my new diary and I journal. Is that what I'm supposed to call it? My date planner.
Yes, I guess I understand that it would be a diary, but yes, day planner would be the US way of looking at it.
I can flick through it and it tells me things like it's National Popcorn Day and National Hot Dog Day. And I don't know why we need a day. I mean,
like,
I like
which nation is celebrating the hot dog?
Yeah. Every day can be hot dog day.
Every day can be hot dog day.
So yeah, and so I'm discovering all these new ones I didn't even know exist because I'm told to by my date planner book. But yeah, at the moment it's currently Black History Month in the UK. So I'm seeing that from a slightly different side now because my son is at senior school, so that's like high school, or maybe middle school, I'm not sure. So it's really interesting seeing it from that perspective of what the school is delivering on that, especially because, you know, in London, it's a really multicultural city. So, you know, we've got loads of different ethnicities and races and all different people mixing together.
Yeah.
So it is something that is obviously really important and that the kids in London growing up should be learning about. Is everybody doing that sensitively? Is everybody doing it intentionally? Is it a bit arbitrary? Are we just marking it? You know, across the board, obviously there's varied versions of this. And, you know, how does that sit in terms of, you know, oh, it's National Donut Day, but it's also National Day of, you know, celebrating this country or that person or that group of people. That's not quite the same thing, is it? So,
yeah, I mean, so
they're not really on a par with each other is what I'm saying, you know. Some things are a bit more serious and deserving of a day or a month. Some of them are more serious,
but you know, like I know I'm here for the fun type of things too. Like, you know, if it gives me an excuse to go to a donut shop today because it's National Donut Day, I'm definitely going to use that as an excuse. But I'll find a new excuse tomorrow when it's not National Donut Day. But like last month I participated just in video form with an organization in the US called Mixed Asian Media. And so they created a Mixed Asian Day, and it was just a day to celebrate. It was based out of New York, but other people kind of picked up on it. And so like another event popped up in DC and things like that. And so they had reached out to me because I've had the creator, Alex Iowata, on my show, and she was just asked, you know, could you do a video about this, about being Mixed Asian? And another difference between the US and the UK is that when the US says Asian, they literally mean mostly East Asians, sometimes Southeast Asians, and rarely South Asians, where in the UK, Asian is usually mostly assigned to South Asians, right? And so
I suspect that in the UK, if you did have something that had that title though, like that to me would feel inclusive of the entire continent because it's factual.
So. Right.
But whenever I've seen Mixed Asian media and things, I have to say, like, I am like, that's not for me.
It's
like,
mostly East Asian.
Yeah, that doesn't feel like that's something
maybe
for
Southeast
me.
Asian.
So
yeah. So I was asked to do just a quick video acknowledging it and things like that. And for the last couple of years, I've been sort of growing into my Asian Americanness versus having a specifically Japanese or mixed Japanese identity or even an Asian identity itself. Because what I say about being in the US and as an Asian person is we're not Asian in Asia. We're Japanese, we're Korean, we're Filipino, we're Indian, you know, but in the US we're Asian. Everything gets stuck together. And I mean, even in our Heritage Month, like Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander month.
Yeah, that's a huge
it's just commas, right?
These are not interchangeable things.
They're not. And even South Asians feel completely left out of that circle where you almost have to like bombard them in and like you know squeeze them in a way that's just like, oh, we forgot about y'all. You're on the continent too, right? Okay, okay, let's
we can give you some letters.
You know, right? Like it's just like one thing, and so it's stuff like that makes me feel not great in representing them because I don't want to be a part of a system that's just like this grants us permission not to acknowledge the history, the atrocities, the what, you know, all the things throughout the year. We'll just sandwich it in now so we can have it in consumable, you know, pieces.
And then it's like, we've given you that, we've placated you with that. So pipe down the rest of the year, please. Keep your issues till then. I've given you a specific time to tell me your complaints.
And then it also forces like our media to release in different ways. Like Black
Yeah.
History Month, while it is great, like when we have had it in the US for a long time, while it is
Mm.
great in terms of exposing new media and things like that,
Yeah.
films that are predominantly viewed as like Black films
Mm.
come out in February,
Yeah.
you know, or Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, same thing. Like they end up coming out during
Yeah.
that time. And okay, great. But like, what if in February I wanted to watch something about
Yeah.
Japan or,
Yeah.
you know,
And
or something like that? You know, why is it that we have to wait
it
around?
is that actually sort of spreading awareness and promoting integration that the, you know, and celebrating the fact that these different communities exist in our culture, or is that shoving people back further into boxes again and
That's
saying
what
you
it
can come out and talk
feels
about
like.
that during that month? Like, it just
Yeah,
feels
that's what
icky
it
to me.
feels like.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten a couple of messages over the years, and not like I'm not hit with it like, Sharmane, you're not representing or anything like that. But I will get the occasional message like, I noticed you didn't do anything for Asian American History Month or whatever. And two things I usually respond is, one, I'm attempting to have a global podcast. And in that case, you know, acknowledging just the American heritage months or anything like that doesn't necessarily make sense. That being said, there are certain things that happen at certain times a year that it makes sense to focus and acknowledge it on, you know, like January, February, acknowledging like when the United States put Japanese people in internment camps and stuff like that, based off of what happened in Pearl Harbor. Every year in December 7th, I have to fucking listen to some shit about Pearl Harbor. And it's, you know, like it's almost 100 years now, you know, like let's chill the hell out on it. But then by the time internment day comes, it's just the Japanese American organizations.
Yeah.
And so it's stuff like that that makes it really frustrating for me to try to balance celebrating culture all year long, which I literally do on my show, and doing the arbitrary acknowledgement of
I've got the badge on today, you know, because I'm supposed to, you know. I did an episode of my podcast, which obviously, as you know, is mini, but so I touched on this briefly. So in the UK we have South Asian Heritage Month, which is, I'll be honest with you, I am of South Asian heritage and I didn't know it existed until very recently. So they did a really good job promoting that. But maybe they should put a memo out to you know, down the phone tree, because we're all connected. I don't know why
I know. And did it not make it on the auntie phone line? Are you kidding me?
And we but it's from like the middle of one month. It starts on like the 14th of one month and goes over to, so why would that, doesn't make any sense to me. What the hell is that about? Why would you not just make it February or March? Or
that's exactly what's happening in the US right now with Hispanic and Latine Heritage Month. It's October 15th to November.
Going on in the first week of October that we couldn't overlap. I want to know what took precedence over my people.
Right. We like things to start good, to at the beginning. October 1st, November 1st.
Because if it was just hot dogs and donuts, then, you know, that might be insensitive.
Put it on the 17th. We'll be fine.
South Asian Donut Heritage Month. Sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts. Yeah, we can do that.
The perfect collaboration.
Yeah. Oh, and you know what? They could bring out a masala donut. You know, Hey, look. I mean, guys.
Now we've convinced ourselves.
Flavor ideas.
We've talked us into, so we're here for the Heritage Months now. As long as you throw a donut,
as long as you come in with it. Yeah, if you give me a crossover, a collab, I'm here for it. So I didn't, and also one of the things that struck me was that, like, one of the things we have these days, and like we're saying, they're already squishing together different communities and different cultural groups into one. But even when it is just one, you know, am I South Asian? Am I Asian? Like, you know, these are labels, these are big terms. These are terms that other people are like, well, that's for you. And this month is for you, but it's not for you, but it is, you know, with the, you know, if it was Asian heritage, you know, is that for me? Is that for you? Is it for both of us? Who knows? Depends on where we are, clearly. But I just think for me, it brings up quite a lot of like what's valid for me to, you know, for me to identify as, what labels I'm allowed to accept for myself, which ones I want to reclaim, which ones, you know, so it does bring up a lot of stuff because, again, it's just squishing people into boxes is kind of how I feel about it. And, you know, even if you do South Asia, like there's so many countries
cultures
within
and-
that.
yeah.
And within those countries, I think I did get all the stats right. And if you go and listen to my podcast, I said there's like this many countries and this many languages and this many religions, right? And I did count them all, because it's just, that's mind blowing, you know. So even to just lump those things together is not realistic, because we have vastly different experiences.
It also makes me aware of what I don't know in kind of a strange way. And so I guess it's kind of tying into what we are gonna do on this show. Is the other day I was watching a documentary about a murder or a natural death, who knows, that happened in Jakarta. And you know, so it's Indonesia, and they were talking a lot about Australia and things like that. And I knew that Indonesia and Australia have somewhat of a relationship. But the more that they talked about the murder itself, I was like, I don't know shit about Indonesia. You know, like in terms of like Asian American Pacific Islander month, like I know the names of a lot of these countries.
Yeah.
I'm sometimes surprised to find out what people look like in these countries. And it's just because I stumbled on a documentary because I was feeling very crime documentary nighttime. Yeah. You know,
we all get like that.
You know, and I mean, and normally it's some white blonde girl and and stuff like that. But when I noticed that it was you know, like an Asian murder documentary, I was like, oh man, I've literally only seen one of those in my past. And so I sat down and I'm very interested. I'm completely interested in the story now. But separate from that, I was like, I need to learn about Indonesia, you know, like, and it just made me feel like, you know, as an Asian American History Month or something like that, what I see is Japanese, which of course I feel represented because I'm Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Filipino, and maybe an Indian person, You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's pretty much it. And I was just like, there are so many countries, cultures. I mean, in Indonesia alone, just a stat that I got off of that documentary, there are 700 languages in Indonesia. There are 300 ethnic groups in Indonesia. Forget about religion. Let's not even talk about how many religions flow through that place. And that alone makes like what happens in the US seem so silly about like, don't speak Spanish in this American place when like Spanish is one of the national languages of the United States. And I'm like, we can't get one language approved across the board. And there's a country smaller than one of our smallest states. And they're going to say, 700 different languages. And most people speak about 3 to 4. You know what I'm saying? Like, it seems so wild. So like things like this show me what the heritage months aren't doing.
Which is a really good point, because if they're not starting with education and they're not really providing representation,
right,
then what are they for?
Placating.
And if we don't feel represented or enhanced or encouraged by them or embraced, which we're saying we don't, then exactly. Is this just another way for them to pat themselves on the backs and go, oh look, we did that.
We did a good job, right? Because like, listen, I'm a part when an American hears the word Asian, they immediately think of the joke, the top 3. I am a member of the top 3 because my family comes from Japan. And the top 3 is Chinese, Korea, and Japan. Even I, like you said, even I do not feel represented. Like, yes, I see Japanese stuff represented, but it's usually anime or, you know, something like that, fucking cherry blossoms and things, you know, like just really generic things. And then they'll couple it with something Chinese, or something Korean, which would make my family go crazy if they saw it, you know, because they understand that these countries don't get along.
That's the thing. Just because we're next to each other doesn't mean we're best friends, guys. Right? I mean, just because you can't tell us apart, right? Because you can't, let's be real. And, you know, because you don't know where this food comes from, or you don't know what that language sounds like or looks like written down, doesn't mean we're all besties over here. Because, you know, historically, crack a book, there's quite a lot of conflict.
Because what happens when a border draws up is that you become an in and they become an out. And it does not matter where that border sits. And so in the United States, our out is Mexico
Yeah.
And, sometimes Canada, but you kind of forget Canada exists, like as an American, you tend to not think about them. And then suddenly a Canadian pop up and you're like, oh, wow, I forgot you're all up there. Like that's really how it is there. And it's just because they're, a white neighbor.
Hey,
or whatever.
Canadian fans, thanks for tuning in.
And it's funny because I have family up there too. And it's one of those things where you're just like, isn't that just like America Diet Coke style? Like it's just kind of like a smaller version. And that's
how to win friends and influence people on a podcast. Right. Off an entire nation.
I'm not saying this. I want to say that my country that I was born in says this. I apologize. But you know what I'm saying? But like in Japan, like I've literally heard members of my family say, we're Japanese. They can be Asian. Yeah. Literally pointing to everybody else that's in Asia. We're not the same. And I'm like, that's funny because how do you think we were created? Like there's a migration pattern that goes from Africa into the Middle East, into South Asia, up the fucking thing, like how do you think we popped up? But yeah, so I don't know. I've been feeling this for years, and I there's a part of me that, as a mixed race podcaster, feels like it is an obligation that I should acknowledge it. But then I need to learn more because if I'm really trying to have a global podcast, I can't just acknowledge it in the U.S. and that's even more prevalent for me now that I live in Mexico because I don't have to deal with a lot of the things that I consider silly shit from the U.S. anymore because it's not constantly happening. Yeah. But because I am, an international person, I think because of my family, my social media is geared in such a way that like, I know that it's Black History Month in the UK. Yeah. I'm watching a whole bunch of people posting videos about it. Yeah, exactly. And then in February, I'm going to watch a whole bunch of people posting videos about it. Which is what I'll be doing. From the US, right? Yeah. And it's just because of the way I'm coded. And over the years, I've started following more indigenous people from the United States. I'm starting to follow more South Asians. Because again, East Asia was the Asia and all the other Asians are just like, oh yeah, you're there too. I've had to actively do that over the last, 5 years of social media that I've been paying attention. And I learn new stuff all the time. But then every time I learn something, I'm like, I'm 45 years old. How am I just learning about this? And this happens a lot like inter-community learning too, because like I've always known in the US, I've always known about the bombings of Black towns or the floodings of Black towns where Black people were prosperous. The white people nearby didn't like it. Right. They killed and bombed and eventually flooded places. And so there's like these lakes in the United States that have horrible histories of people like drowning or bad things happening to them at that lake. And everybody says that, well, that's because there's a Black town underneath, like there's the spiritual baddies out there will say like, oh, that's a karmic thing that's happening and stuff like that. So we have all this stuff that goes on in the US that's like that. And then a TV show a couple years ago, The Watchmen, highlights, one of those events, Black Wall Street, basically is what they called Tulsa and what happens there. Yeah. And tons of people don't know about this. I know about this because I'm a Black person, I'm a mixed Black person, and it's been a part of our family. Yeah. But like Tom Hanks gets on the internet and he screams about how mad he was that he didn't know that happened. And
I remember him saying,
right, and he felt bad because he lived in Oakland near the Black Panthers. He's like, how can I be that close to a Black organization and stuff like that? But my country is still not educating me on what atrocities my country has committed against its own people. And he's like, I'm 50 years old, like he's in his 50s when he learns about that. And then
to be fair, Tom, Mr. Hanks, if you will, you got a lot of money. You got a lot of time on your hands. If that
you can get tutors.
I really feel like that and you are a man of that age. So I do feel at some point you probably have to take responsibility for that yourself. There are a lot of us who have got loads of reasons for what, just trying to make ends meet or whatever it is, why they haven't just spent their entire time educating themselves. But celebrities piss me off with stuff like that because it's like, what you could have done was chosen to educate yourself first before opening your mouth and then shone a light on it and then try to speak to the right people and get the right education and then push that out.
Because what is the message there? Yeah. I'm mad I didn't get taught this, or I'm mad that it happened. And what I remember is that he was upset he didn't know about it, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
And the same thing happened last year when Marvel did Miss Marvel, and they talked about partition. And a lot of people didn't know about that in the US at all either. And all the Pakistani people and all the Indian people are like, this is just part of our history. Like our families were literally torn apart, and there's some people still alive that remember.
Yeah, but my family,
you know,
exactly. Because I'm Punjabi, so like members of my family were there, and that, exactly, and it was this shadow that lived over everything and everybody, and still does.
I think it still does,
like
right? Yeah. And so for like Westerners, I guess, to start to learn about it, because something in pop culture has taught them that. That reminds me again, what are those heritage months doing? What are these history months doing? Because what we're not learning is even the hugest of things that happened within those cultures. Forget about the everyday things and the small people and but like,
these are the major points.
How do we not know about partition? How do we not know about the bombing and the floodings of these Black towns? How do we not know XYZ?
Yeah.
And
because the thing is, I'd almost argue, like, I get it, but I'd argue that obviously not knowing about something that happens on the other side of the world, I'm going to give people a pass on that, because
a certain amount of grace,
because it would be better to know about what happened on your doorstep first, and by doorstep I even mean that if you're up the top and something happened in the south, that in the
right,
States, it still counts because it's your it's an enormous place, but it's still part of your cultural history somehow. So but I do think I'm not sure that they are doing their job these months and days, and also if we're feeling any kind of responsibility to deliver education and awareness because of them, then is that okay? Because
it's this is another unpaid labor.
That's it. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's our labor that's going out for who? I know.
I've done the research.
And we are the sort of people who are going to read a book if we find out, oh shit, I didn't know about that. Let me learn. That's what I'm learning about tomorrow. That's what I'm dedicating my day to tomorrow.
Which you and I have legit had that exchange. Like you posted something on Instagram, and I was like, shit, I didn't know anything about that. Go into the Googles, and you'll say the same type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And like that's the response that you and I won't just credit the fact that we're mixed people, but that we're brown people at minimum, maybe. That's the reaction we have. I don't know anything about this. So rather than denying it happened or anything like that, my first instinct and your first instinct is, well, I need to go learn something about this. Like I'm triggered to learn more about Indonesia because I watched a fucking murder podcast. It's not like I'm like, I want to know more about murder in Indonesia. I specifically was like, I want to know about Indonesia because I didn't realize I didn't know that much about it, because it's just one of those things that's not present.
But that, I mean, they say that that's like the ultimate humility, isn't it? Is being humble enough to know how much you don't know.
Yes.
So because a lot of people who go around there thinking they know it all, and the cleverest people realize how much they don't fucking know. So
when I hear a stat like there's 17,000 islands that are categorized as Indonesia, my brain doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know that huge landmass. My country stretches from ocean to ocean, and
from
top
sea
to bottom.
To shiny sea, right?
From sea to shiny sea, and it's like a super big place. So I don't have really necessarily the concept of what it's like to be in a country where like most of the islands of the country are uninhabited. I mean, Japan is like that too. 700
that's
islands or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't have a frame of reference for 17,000 plots of land. I don't have that in my head. And so that instantly sparked a curiosity in me. So I guess it was a question I had. I don't have an answer, a clean answer for the audience to wrap it up, but I just I can't be the only one that's brown that sees these months pop up and go, ugh. And that's really what I feel.
I completely agree. So that's interesting because I think that's what we're saying, isn't it? That we can't be the only ones who feel that way. So who is it really serving? And is it the best way to serve our communities? And maybe ask us, if somebody wants to start one of these, maybe they should reach out to a wider sample of communities to see what it is that they might like or might need.
Like if BBC or PBS comes to either of us, super famous mixed race podcasters, and says, hey, here's a check for this, educate us on this, we'll take that fucking check and I'll do the fucking research.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I probably already got several.
I probably have
tabs that I got open at this moment.
Right. Yeah, like ADHD. There's 100 tabs. Yeah. So, anyways, thanks for thanks for letting me throw that into our show because I was
good.
like,
that's what we're here for.
This bothers me. Like, this really bothers me, and I don't want to be a dick, but like. Do I have to acknowledge this fucking holiday month or something? Because it's really irritating. Because it makes me feel like I'm doing the work for the white supremacists, like for the placating the white people, and I don't.
Yeah. For something that they're just using to placate us, right? So I think that's the point, isn't it?
Yes.
What the hell is that about? Yeah.
I have no idea if this has anything to do with what you're going to share with us today, because I just came in hot with my little topic. But we are also a true crime podcast. So this is your turn. I got to do last week with Graham Young, the teacup murderer, poisoner. I'm sorry. What are you bringing to us
so right, first a bit of mug chat. I'm working with eyes today. What have we got?
Ooh, I am Representation Matters, which is done in the image of Reading Rainbow, which is a big popular show here in the United States.
Okay.
But it's a queer company, and the reason why I'm using this mug today is the company is called Beyond Calexa. They're on the internet. They didn't pay me for this. I bought this for everyone.
I'm always doing that. Like I did that just this week.
Yeah, you did yesterday.
Nobody give me this for free.
If someone wants to give me some shit for free, I will take all the shit for free, and I will talk about it on my podcast. This mug is
by Eleanor Bowman, and you can buy it in the UK. She's an independent designer. So Excellent. There you
go. But yeah, it's National Coming Out Day, which part of what triggered my
mug choice.
But yeah. Representation matters, y'all.
Now, what does this say about me, though? Is I've got my eye on the prize. I can't make that work. Right. So it is me. It is I, is it? Shall I be mother? I liked it. Allow me to tell you the tale of the Barnes Mystery or the Richmond Murder, depending on your flavor, because there are two names for this story.
Okay.
A little bit of background. So this is the story of the murder of Julia Martha Thomas, and it is a story of stolen identity, almost cannibalism, and cold-blooded killing. And I hope you haven't heard this one because I
have not. This is completely new.
Okay. Yeah. This is a crime which spans 5 British monarchs, and it has also got a surprise celebrity twist ending.
Okay.
So this has got something for everyone. I was like, when I stumbled onto this, I was like, color me intrigued. So I'm going to introduce you to our victim.
Okay.
Julia Martha Thomas was 54. She was twice widowed. She was a former school teacher, and she was living alone in Richmond, southwest London.
Okay. In
a nice enough house, in a nice enough area. She's not super well off. She's not destitute. You know, she's doing all right for herself. There's a pretty rural area. There are a few houses dotted around. There's a pub in the village called the Hole in the Wall.
Nice.
And she was generally regarded as kind of eccentric by her neighbors. And this is the point when I fell in love with Julia, because I was like, right, let's see what classified you as eccentric back in 1879. So that's
literally going to be that she could read.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the key here is we're starting and we're in Victorian England.
Okay.
So she was considered eccentric, and she was described as having an excitable temperament. And I thought, wonder what that means. She's got opinions, and she would travel for weeks and months at a time and not tell anybody where she was going, and nobody knew. And apparently that made you eccentric at the time. She liked to conduct herself as though she was a bit more well-to-do than she perhaps was. She would wear a lot of jewelry and quite fine clothing and stuff on the outside because she liked to keep up and be like that. It was also said about her, one slight negative was that she was unable to keep staff in her house. So she would have a maid and they wouldn't last very long. And she had a pretty high turnover of ladies. So she was quite harsh and a lot of people came and come and gone. So yes, the 29th of January, 1879. Right. I had to read that date to make sure I got it right. Julia, our victim, employs Ms. Kate Webster. Now, she has got form, Kate Webster. So to give you a bit of background about her, she was described as a tall, strongly made woman of about 5'5", with a sallow
strongly made
in a lab, with a sallow and much freckled complexion and large prominent teeth, which I mean, that seems kind of harsh, you know. But so she is actually an Irish lady. She was born in County Wexford in Ireland, and she was probably about 30 at this time. So she had led a life of crime, and she had done a lot of fibbing about the place. She claimed to have been married to a sea captain and had 4 children, and all of them died in very quick succession within a really short time of each other, which feels a little suspicious.
Munchausen syndrome.
The plot thickens. So as an Irish immigrant, though, she wouldn't have been thought of particularly well in England at the time. So
I mean, even in the physical description, that sounds
quite
racist.
It's pretty harsh. Look at her with her freckles and big teeth.
I wasn't shocked to find out she was Irish after hearing all that.
So maybe this is why she turned to a life of crime. You know, do we need to feel sorry for her? She had been imprisoned at the age of 15, was when she first went to prison for larceny, which I had to recheck the definition of larceny, which was the Victorian word for theft, which we don't use anymore. There was larceny and grand larceny, and now we just call it robbery and theft and stuff. She was sentenced to 4 years of penal servitude, which isn't as dodgy as you think. It's hard labor, which also isn't as dodgy as you think. She didn't have to be transported to a foreign country to do the hard time, which some people were if they'd done really serious crimes. So she was able to remain in the UK. If we fast
Australia and the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Entirely peopled with criminals they are. If we fast forward a bit, right, Kate has moved to Hammersmith, which is West London, which incidentally is where I first moved to when I moved to London. But I wasn't leading a life of crime then. Could still happen. You can save this for, you know, when I'm on the news having done some kind of crime. So she made friends with this family who lived near her called the Porters. Now I'm saying that name because they will come up again near the end, but they're not really in this story too much. So she gave birth to a baby. And who was the father of this child? She was unmarried. She suggested 3 possible father figures for this child, all of whom denied it. One of the guys who it could have been may have been an accomplice of hers for some petty theft and robberies that she was up to. So he was obviously a bad guy. She's in London. She's using all these different aliases and trying to get away with all these different crimes. Then she gets charged with 36 counts of larceny. So she ends up getting banged up in Wandsworth Nick, which is just around the corner from me. So that's nice. And she, when she gets released from there, she's immediately rearrested because she did some more crime. And so she goes another year in the slammer. I'm using all nice London slang here. I hope everyone appreciates that. It doesn't just, I don't normally talk like that. I got it added to the, you know. Right, so she gets out of prison again. And up until this point, her son, remember the baby, and we don't know who his dad is, he'd been being looked after by a friend of hers who was working as a maid. Then that friend was ill and couldn't go to work. So Kate steps up to fill her shoes at work for a little bit of time. And then when she was better, you know, the friend went back to her job. In this time, Kate did a pretty good job of being a maid. So the woman that she was working for said, my friend is looking for a new maid. Why don't you go and be her maid? So that is how Kate arrived on Julia's doorstep, because we know that Julia couldn't keep a maid. So it's no surprise that she was finding herself without any servant.
And so Julia with the jewels.
Yeah. So As time went on, Julia was a bit of a stickler, and she was very critical of Kate's work and her cleaning skills, and tensions began to rise. And gradually, Julia began to feel really ill at ease with Kate in the household, and she would invite friends to stay and stuff because she just didn't even want to be alone with her at this point. She was a bit worried about what she might do because Kate had this slightly fiery temper. She decided she was going to sack her. So she said, on your bike, get out. And Kate pleaded, I've got a child, please help me. So, okay, 4 more days. You can stay for 4 more days. And if you don't turn things around, you're out. On Sunday afternoons, Kate had the afternoon off work on the understanding that she would come back in the evening to help Julia prepare for some church service thing. It shows how much I don't know about church. Some church service thing. This particular Sunday afternoon, Kate did not arrive home on time because she'd been down the boozer. Remember that pub that's in the village? That's where she'd been, the hole in the wall. So she, had a few drinks, came home late, big argument ensues. Julia goes off to church, comes back, the argument continues. Kate is so angry with Julia that she pushed her down the flight of stairs. And when Julia landed at the bottom of the flight of stairs, she let out a scream. And at this point, Kate panics, thinking, I don't want the neighbors to hear. I don't want anybody to know what's going on. So she rushes down the flight of stairs, grabs her by the throat, lifts her up to just try and keep her quiet, but accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, ends up throttling her. And she drops her to the ground.
Yeah, like you can accidentally throttle somebody.
Happens more often than you think. So...
I did not mean to throttle you just now, but my bad.
Forgive me, it wasn't my intention. So she didn't want the neighbors to know, and actually only a single thud was heard, and they ignored it. So her ploy worked. Nobody was suspicious at this time. This is where it gets really fucking gruesome. So if you're eating, you might want to not be doing so at this point. So she's like, shit, I need to cover this up, right? So what am I going to do? How am I going to literally get away with murder? So she gets a razor and a meat saw and a carving knife.
Right.
And she uses the razor to cut the head off the body. I don't know why she didn't use one of the other bigger things at this point.
A lot of work.
Right? So she cuts the head off the body. She uses the meat saw and the carving knife to dismember the rest of the body. She takes out some of the organs and she decides to burn all the different pieces to get rid of the flesh as best she can. So she's chopping this up into small pieces and she's using a big copper pot to boil the body parts. At this point, the neighbors did detect a foul stench coming from the house, but they also thought, oh, well, it's the early hours of Monday morning, and that's when everybody does laundry, and sometimes laundry's stinky, so what are you going to do? So they don't raise an alarm or do anything. So now she's got these partially boiled bits of body, and she's got to do something with them. So she gets Julia's overnight bag and hat box. She starts shoving all the bits in. But they're not big enough to fit all the bits in. So she ends up with the head and a foot that don't fit in the bag and the hat box.
Like you do.
I told you this was going to get gruesome. So she decides she threw the foot away into a trash heap, like a big rubbish heap on the side of the road in Twickenham in London. And she's like, what am I going to do with this head? Shit, right. She takes it to the pub, and behind the pub there are stables because obviously people coming, might be riding horses and carriage to the pub. She buries the head under the stables behind the hole in the wall pub.
That's too close to home.
She's thrown away the foot, just casually as well, just in a heap, and she's buried the head.
People are used to finding random feet. That's not
sure.
That's not weird.
That's not the weird part of the story. At this point, she assumes Julia's identity. She dresses in Julia's clothes.
Smart.
She takes the bag and the hat box, and she goes on her travels to visit the family of friends that she had made before, the Porters. Do you remember them from back before? It's been 6 years since they've seen her. So she says to them, my name is Mrs. Thomas. In the time since I last saw you, I've been married and I'm sadly widowed, but I have inherited this lovely house from my aunt in Barnes. Like this is in Richmond, Julia's house. So they kind of go, okay, fine, right. They believe her. And then she, she said she'd had another child, and I'm not sure whether that was actually true. That was a bit unclear. So she then says, let's reconnect. Let's go down the pub. So they decide to go for a trip to the pub. Not that pub, a different pub. So they go to a pub in Barnes, which is on the River Thames, which is sort of South London on the River Thames. And while they're in there having a drink, she nips out to the river and chucks the bag in the river. Smart. With the body parts. So she's disposed of the head, the rogue foot, and now a big bag of body parts. But she's still got the hat box. So then she goes for a stroll over Twickenham Bridge, which is another area of London. They must be walking back from the pub with the porters. And she says to one of it's my hat box. She says to one of the young men, "Oh, nice young man in the Porter family. This is very heavy, my hat box, because it contains, pieces of people. Please can you help
other people carry your murdered people?"
So she says, "Can you help me, please, kind sir?" And as she's handing it over to him, there's a fumble and it falls into the river because they're on the bridge over the river. So now the hat box of pieces is in the Thames too. And he doesn't find anything suspicious with this, whatever. This all seems fine. I mean, it was pretty
falls in the river.
It happens, what are you going to do? Oh no, my hats, all of them in the box. So that's just what happened. Right. The next day, this is it's quite a long-winded story. The next day, a dude finds the bag washed up on the shore of the Thames. And does he find the bag or does he find the box? He finds the bag, and inside the bag, he opens it up and there are pieces of body wrapped up in like brown paper. So he has a good look, and then he takes it to the police because he thought it was going to be stolen loot from a robbery or something. So he's looking for rich stuff and he didn't find it. He takes it to the police.
Bones and meat.
They examine it and they find the torso of a lady missing its organs that has been messed around with to some degree. Then they realize they're counting up body parts and they realize they're missing a leg and a foot and a head. And, there's all these different bits that are not in there. Then a few miles upstream, somebody finds a foot and an ankle that have washed up. But for some reason, they don't connect these two incidents of body parts being washed up, right? So at the moment, these are
down the river,
which is why we end up with the Richmond Murder and the Barnes mystery, because they found two sets of remains. Okay. But we know it's going to be part of the same story. But at this time, it's not. People thought this was amazing. People were like, "I'm sure it was somebody practicing anatomy," and then they were just discarding what they've been practicing.
British politeness can be so ridiculous sometimes.
Not like, but where did they find these, random corpses to dismember and brutalize? But it's okay, because if he was studying to be a doctor, maybe they were all Asian. Oh, he's going to be a doctor. It's so good.
Yeah,
it's fine.
You can take out a few destitute folks just for science. For
science, exactly. So the gruesome bit, legend has it, this is even more gruesome, that Kate, she had to do something. She'd been boiling everything and she had to get rid of the evidence, right? So she scrapes
bowl of brown
into jars and she screws the lid on, and she goes round to the neighbors because she's got this excellent quality beef dripping lard in the jars. And so, would you like to eat this? Would you like to cook with this? Now, there isn't full evidence that this did happen, but there are like 3 or 4 different versions. One of them says that some little boys, some children ate it.
Okay.
And one of them says that she gave it to the parish and it was distributed amongst the entire community, these jars of human fat lard. Oh my God. Okay, so she carries on living in Julia's house, assuming Julia's identity, sort of,
But don't neighbors remember Julia?
So Julia used to go and disappear and not tell anyone where she was going for weeks or months at a time, right? So she was an eccentric lady, I mean, this is played right into Kate's hands.
Perfect.
It's coming up roses for Kate so far. And so she's opening the door to guests and she's doing all the things and she's cleaning the house and whatever. But she is dressed like Julia and she has decided, to do a few things that raise an eyebrow or two. So she decides to sell all the furniture in the house. And a guy comes with his horse and cart ready to give her the money and take all the furniture away. And the next door neighbor's like, okay, this is a bit suspicious. So, those foul stenches, those thumps in the night, that was fine. But this is a little sus. So she says to the guy, who asked you to do this? Like, why who did you make this sale with? And he said, Ms. Thomas. And she says, well, when did you speak to her? And she's in there right now. And he points at Kate. And at this point, the neighbor realizes she's pretending to be Julia. So at that point, Kate realizes, shit, they're onto me. This isn't going to end well for me. So she legs it and she goes back to Liverpool, and then she goes back to Ireland, and she makes the crossing, and Scotland Yard is on the case because that's our sort of big criminal crime guys. So they track her down to Ireland and they arrest her, and she's got this young
They really
son
went
with
all the
her.
way to Ireland for her.
They went all the way, yeah. And they got her, and she's got this son, and none of her family would take in her little son because she was a criminal, and they said, we're not having him. We don't want a bit of it.
So he ends up criminal blood in your household.
He ends up in the workhouse, which I think is really sad. So that did not end well for him. So there was a sensational court case that lasted over 6 days, and they were trying to piece together the story and the body parts because there's all these body parts. What's happened in the meantime? So they've got separate camps of body parts, right? So the one lot that they found first, that they assumed was an anatomy student, right? The police ruled that that's probably what this was. They buried them in a graveyard, in an unmarked grave in Barnes somewhere. So that's the Barnes mystery.
Okay.
But they just put that to bed. But they've got all these other bits, which were from the hat box and the foot. But they haven't found the head, and she never told anybody what she did with that, right? But they have got these other bits. So they think they've got enough to get her for murder, but they realize that they don't have a full thing. And at this point, she's still claiming her innocence, and she's not willing to say. So she pleads for leniency by saying she's pregnant. Now, she wasn't actually pregnant, but she said she was pregnant. So the judge, this had never happened before. They employed 12 women who were basically midwives and swore them in as like a separate kind of jury to come and examine her with a doctor to determine whether or not she was in fact with child. And at this point, they used this weird term, whether she was quick with child or with quick child.
Yeah.
So meaning that at that time, if the quickening hadn't happened, that life hadn't begun, because they gave these stages of pregnancy and fetal development. And so their opinion was, if it was before this, it's not really, but if it's after, well, then she's really pregnant then.
That would do real well in the abortion break here
God, can you imagine?
Back in the United States right now.
Yeah. So maybe that's what they're going to bring in, a jury of 12 women to come and have a good look and decide, is this a real baby? There was no baby. So she did not get any leniency, and she was sentenced to death by hanging at Wandsworth Prison. She was only the second ever person to be hanged there because it was relatively new. And yet I think it was like 135 people in total were hanged at that particular prison. And she was the only woman ever to be hanged there.
Oh, wow.
In the history of hanging, because we stopped that.
Such a weird thing to be the only or the first of.
Yeah, kind of. So the house, Julia's house, becomes like a hotbed of activity. So sensational was this trial because of the gruesome nature of it. Because even though they haven't found all of it and they don't know everything, it's still pretty gruesome that you killed someone and chopped them up, pretending to be them, and you're a woman, and this is not, the done thing at all. So sensational crime. Tourists are literally flocking. People are making up like rhymes that children are singing in the street, that there are pamphlets being sold, newsletters. People are taking gravel and like bits of plants and stuff from the house as mementos and souvenirs. It really was like a big deal. And Madame Tussauds, which is the waxwork people, right? They built a waxwork of Kate between her getting arrested and her being hanged. They built this waxwork figure of her for people to come and like spit at and throw stuff on, like basically an effigy. So that could be where our story ends, except for the fact that they never found the head. So if we were to fast forward to 2010,
oh my gosh,
there is a man living in the cottages which are next to Mayfield Cottages, which is where Julia's house was. He's living in his house. He's been living there since 1952. The pub, the Hole in the Wall pub, remember that pub, has fallen into disrepair. And he decides, I'm going to buy that. I'm going to do it up, and I'm going to make it lovely for this community. Why shouldn't we have a lovely pub here again? Yeah. So he sets about renovating it, and he gets a team of guys in, and they're digging and whatever. And they find what was described as a dark circular object, and they pull it out. And they realize it's a fucking skull. At that point, it's taken to the police. They examine it. They do all kinds of tests. Now, they do connect it with the situation because it's, right next door, basically. And the skull has injuries and fractures to it that are consistent with a fall down the stairs, and also are consistent with the asphyxiation, the throttling that had happened.
Okay.
And
wow,
also,
even after all those years? That's crazy.
Even after all that time. And even the other thing was that it was shown to have reduced collagen, which within it, which is because it had been boiled. So as it was boiled, the collagen had seeped out. So although they could really only date the skull to a really big number of years, like a bracket of a few decades, once they put it together with what had happened to it and its location, it was pretty clear. And obviously, unfortunately, Julia didn't have any living blood relatives. So they couldn't actually do DNA testing. But this felt really strong. And they didn't know where, those other Barnes bones that are buried in an unmarked grave somewhere. Yeah. They don't know where they are. So they couldn't even bring those out to test them against it. And the other ones
just a part of the story, but nobody knows exactly.
Exactly.
Okay, I got you.
That's right. So we still don't know where that is. So in 2011, it was officially ruled by the coroner's court as belonging to Julia. And the case was turned over, and they decided that this was officially murder, not just an open verdict of whatever. And so even though we didn't have the other bones, that was solved. And, Kate's been hanged a long time ago. Yeah. And that's where it could have ended. So the mystery was finally solved. But the final crucial, exciting part is that the guy who owned the house, who was renovating the pub, who lived there since 1952 and in 2010 decides to renovate the pub, and that's how we found the skull, was Sir David fricking Attenborough. And that's how he solved their murder.
Oh my gosh, so random. Why was he there?
Because he lived in this really nice posh area, which what's now become a really nice posh area of London. And so he's lived there since the 50s, and he and his wife are like, oh, let's renovate the local pub.
He's already he's got BBC money and stuff.
Yeah, like well, exactly, point, so. Right?
Wow. I forgot that you said there was going to be a surprise celebrity.
Yes.
That's amazing. And he could totally narrate.
David Attenborough. Oh my God. We don't want him to do the documentary. We want to get the TV rights.
We want to do it.
He's got the BBC money already.
Wow, that's fun.
And here endeth the tale, the tragic tale of poor Julia. But at least her mystery is solved, and all her pieces are laid to rest, if not all in one place.
And that's interesting. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of love Kate too, though.
Oh well, see, this is the thing, isn't it? It's really hard to, once you think about her being an immigrant and having this life of crime, she's been fucked over surely by everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's she's reasons.
Got illegitimate kids. I mean, yeah, she might have murdered the sea captain and all the other kids. She might have just made them up. Who knows? You don't know. I mean, but let's not charge her with that. She's busy doing larceny. So,
and is larceny really that bad?
Exactly. That's right. But she did keep getting caught, so she obviously wasn't.
She wasn't good at it. Yeah. She didn't have high level training. Yeah. I mean, I've definitely worked with the people that sound like Julia, that like generally like, you've got money, you did your thing. I'm proud of you, but also you're a little bit cunty to people. So, like maybe not that. Yeah. I respect that in 1877, 1878, how do you get rid of a body when you're just a random maid that you would go to kitchen work?
So they did say that they thought they'd found charred finger bones in the grate, and that there were blood stains, and there was sort of traces of fat and stuff in the copper pan. And that is, so once the police, after the furniture had been sold and then she disappeared and the neighbors, brought the police in, those were the things that kind of clued them into the fact that something had gone on.
Yeah. I'm surprised there's not more, and please don't make this be a reflection on me as a person, but I'm surprised there's not more post-murder cannibalism stories, to be honest, because it's kind of a brilliant way to get rid of evidence to a degree, I think. One of my favorite movies from my childhood is Fried Green Tomatoes, where the line "secrets in the sauce" because the police are now
Mhm.
eating the body that
Yeah.
they are looking for. And I love that line because I think that's as badass a thing as you can do after removing a body, is just be like, secrets in the sauce. And you hear, like, from time to time, a lot of these sort of, like, you know, a wife murders a husband, and, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of
It's
thing or
kind of,
whatever.
it's kind of, I think the kitchen, it's like we said last week that, you know, poison is a woman's weapon. And I think the culinary disposal is kind of a
It
female
seems
trait.
brilliant. Like,
It's a femme thing.
if you can get your mind away from its people.
Yeah. Do you remember, did you ever see that episode? I don't know if you ever watched South Park, right, back in the day, when Carmen makes him eat Mr. and Mrs. Tenement chili, and he does the song that I made you eat your parents, because he made Scott Tenement eat the chili. And he goes, do you like it, Scott? Because he's eating it. It's so
twisted.
So twisted.
It's so twisted. But like, if you can mentally get yourself to a place that you can look at this, like, I mean, you've already killed a person, so there's got to be some kind of, you know, disassociate. There's got to be something that goes on. So if you can already get past that,
you've already started down that, you know, you might as well carry on.
You might as well, right? And yes, again, I understand it sounds crazy, but you could get rid of a lot of it without it coming back on you necessarily. The hardest part is getting rid of the bones.
Yeah. So, I mean,
you bleach, you do the whole bleaching the bones process.
Yeah.
You stick them in an attic for a long time. And then you go to clean up your attic of your relative that has passed or something. And you're like, oh, they must have had an interest in anatomy or something.
For science, there you go. Science coming through for the
donate it. Something. Because there's a lot of stories about like how real life skeletons or real life murder victims ended up as skeletons in TV shows or in things or whatever, and then someone finds out later, like, do you know where this skeleton comes from?
So my dad is a doctor, right? And we used to have a skull in our house that I was always like, where did it, you know, I wasn't creeped out by it. It's fine, you know, it's just Dave. But why, where?
It's just Dave.
Dave in the dining room. That's where he was.
I'm definitely picking it up and going full Hamlet at some point.
I mean, don't think. I mean, come on. With my history,
I mean, you're an actor. Come on.
Alas,
that's poor Dave. Alas, poor Dave.
But where did he come from? And what? Yeah, why? I'm not sure. I ever got to the bottom of that. But the answer was always, well, you know, your dad's a doctor, so why wouldn't we have a skull?
There is a TikToker, and I don't know who their name is, but I forget what the study of bone or the collection of bones is. There's a name for it or whatever, but he starts one of his videos out, and he has just racks and racks of bones in his house. And he says, technically it's not illegal to have this many human bones. And everybody was like, oh, that's a real suspicious type of thing. Why do you have so many bones? And who are they? And is there racism involved? Because for some reason it feels really racist, even though there's not explicit racism in it. That's a going down the pipe thing. I don't hate. I can't tell if it's because of an older story or if it's because it's just women or what, but like it's a practical way of getting rid.
She got creative, you know, she wasn't afraid to get her hands
points
dirty.
For that. Yeah, certainly.
She acted quickly and under pressure, you know, which I think is an impressive skill set.
Because even though it wasn't necessarily a premeditated murder that we know of, I mean, if you find yourself in a situation where you get in a fight with your boss and you happen to push them down the stairs,
and then accidentally throttle them.
I mean, you are an Irish immigrant in England, and they are prejudiced against you.
Yes. So
you have to find a solution, and that solution happens to be throttling, cutting up, boiling, and burying.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you.
But I told you that story had something for everyone.
It does. It's a good one. I've never heard this one.
I'm so glad because, like you, I was like, oh, I really hope you haven't already heard this because it's good.
I think it's good. And honestly, like, and maybe it's because I watch too many of these documentaries, listen to too many of these podcasts or whatever, but like the way in which I'm searching for ways to be empathetic to like this poor immigrant that, you know, found themselves in this situation. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe she was a complete bastard. She might have been. I don't know. But Rest in peace, Julia, and I guess Kate too, because
Absolutely.
the only
Yeah.
woman to get hung is
Yeah.
in that place is pretty crazy.
Exactly.
This is a good one.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I enjoy it. And I was sitting there, I found myself at one point just like leaning in. I'm like, this is not going to probably make for the best of Instagram or YouTube, where I'm just like staring into your square. I was riveted in it. I love this thing because listen, I mean, you know, you and I talked about podcasting, you know, that we listen to all these podcasts, we watch all these things, we're into the crime, and we both like the more historical thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I keep hearing these like more recent ones and I'm like, fuck, this is really intriguing.
Okay.
But I prefer to dig back where it is
Yeah.
a little bit easier to talk
Yeah.
about it in sort of a separate type of manner. That being said, I would like to highly recommend that documentary I watched the other day. It's called Ice Cold. It's on Netflix.
Okay.
It is the murder and or natural death of a woman named Maîr, and her accused murderer / convicted murderer, Jessica Wongso. And it's a killing with coffee and potentially cyanide, although the science doesn't necessarily back it up. So it's really interesting. This woman is sitting in prison right now and will do for another 15 years, a full 28-year sentence. Everything about it is weird.
Okay, I'm so into it. Right.
Yeah, so definitely watch this thing.
I'm gonna watch it and report back next week.
Yeah, we can talk about it. So I think, and I don't know how you feel about it. Obviously, we're filling ourselves out on this show, but I think maybe if there is an intriguing modern story, we can drop a little hints towards it. But I do like being able to dig into the crates. And for the next week, I'm digging into the crates again as well. It's happening kind of post World War II-ish. So
okay, a little teaser. Very good.
It's far enough back. And for the most part, everybody that is connected, I think everybody that is connected to that crime would be dead now by natural causes, or, you know, they didn't make it. Either of those things.
Spoiler alert, in this murder story, someone has been murdered.
After nearly 100 years, you know.
I don't want to give the game away. But I think that maybe one of the reasons why we have the interest in the more historical ones, though, is because we're saying now, you know, like, what a way to dispose of the body and what's the best thing, because, you know, we haven't got the technology. The people were having to act fast. It's not even like, did they even have a refrigerator to shove the body in to stop it smelling? Probably not.
You have such a small window for it to go south for you.
Exactly. And even though, you know, by the same token, there wasn't all this, you know, CSI and, you know, luminol to spray everywhere and whatever, but so they didn't have the science to necessarily look at everything, but you didn't have the technology and the science to cover everything up either. Yeah. So it levels the playing field. Yeah. Maybe it's just too easy to murder these days, you know?
It might
Murderers
be.
These days don't know they're born, do they, is what I'm saying, because they've got weapons and chemicals and TV programs to watch for tips.
It's like, I now know certain fruits that become certain poisons, all because someone mentions it in a documentary, right? And I don't know shit about how to extract it or anything like that, but, you know, it makes me walk around outside now and being like, can you turn that into a poison? You know, like,
yeah.
Because that's a thing.
Yeah.
But
so you really had to want it back in the day, you know?
I think you did.
Yeah.
Or like Kate, be really quick on the jaw and be like, oh, okay, I'll just assume this person's identity. It's weird when you have such close neighbors, but, you know, if you're going to do what you're going to do, like, I would say if I was Kate, depending on how well people knew me, how well the neighbors knew me and things like that, I would just suddenly be a relative that came into town.
Nice.
And just so happens that I can fit Julia's clothes a bit, maybe some altering, maybe changing, shifting some things around so that it doesn't look like I'm wearing her clothes, you know? But and then just, pack up your household or pretend to be Julia. Don't let anybody see you. Pack up your household and be like, F this, I'm going to somewhere else. And really just, you know, back then you could probably travel less than 10 miles and I assume an entirely new identity.
Yeah, I mean, and she had been doing that already, right? She'd been using aliases and but she wasn't so good at it. So maybe that's why she was like, do you know what? I've been caught for these really small crimes.
Yeah.
I probably better, you know, take extra measures for this really big crime.
Because I feel like if I could have scraped the dough together after committing a murder of someone that was richer than me, I take all their clothes, I assume their identity, I sell off all their shit if I can, and I take that riches. I go back to a different part of Ireland. And now I've just been, I'm a different part of Ireland, so people don't know me. Now I am just the rich widow of somebody in England.
Exactly.
And then, you know, I buy some property if I can at that time legally, because, you know, women didn't have the rights. But I buy some property and I just live my life out as a wealthy widow who just decided to come back to my home country.
Sure. I mean, that's not a bad plan.
Yeah. That way I don't have to work on my accent. I can stay Irish. and maybe people won't look at me like I'm
the freckles aren't such a problem. You know?
Yeah, freckles and big teeth, you know. Just like
so I'm gonna put some pictures up so that you can see Kate. And I have to say, I don't know about freckles and big teeth, but just like Graham, right? Yeah, there's something in the eyes there.
You know what? That's the thing about description. Like, and we were talking about us coming from a different thing. And even though these are white women that are being discussed in this case, there is clear, and maybe racism is the wrong term, but certainly like ethnicityism or something like that. Yeah. The way the English would have just talked, and maybe still to an extent, about Irish people or something, you know, like, if the picture doesn't match the description that Julia had for her, it would just be like, you know, other podcasters might breeze right past that, but
you see, we see that. Yeah, exactly.
We see that. As soon as you said the overly freckled, I think is what you said, and then big, you know, pronounced teeth, I was just like, that sounds racism. Yeah. That sounds like they're doing a racism.
You don't do a racism, exactly. That's what they did.
Yeah, that's essentially what they did.
So
wow.
Well, there we are.
Don't forget to follow us, y'all, on the social medias, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at
Matcha, Masala, Murder.
And drop us ratings, reviews on whatever platform you listen to us on. But if you can listen to us on, and what is it called? Follow us, subscribe to us on the Spotify. That goes a long way in helping us earn a little bit of a wage for this fun little show that we're doing.
Which can in turn bring you more stories just like these.
Right, exactly.
So it's a win-win.
Yeah. We didn't do any tea puns today. I just realized that.
Well, that is true, isn't it? Yeah.
But, you know, I mean,
we did a bit of mug chat, which was good.
We did a mug chat, yeah. I think down the road, and if anybody is listening who has a tea company that they would like us to sample, we are very open to receiving said samples, and we will be happy to share and talk about them on our show, because, you know, we're tea drinkers and we like to drink tea from everywhere.
Yeah, we're your gals.
If my tea comes on time, I might have a tea on theme with the murder.
I love it.
Maybe not the murder itself, but like where the murder is at. Maybe that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do pairing the fine wine, the fine world tea to go with the
just be like an Earl Grey goes really well with the murder of an aristocrat.
Nice. Yeah. A Lady Grey, of course, you know, is an aristocratic lady who's been murdered. Right. So Lady Grey.
A Dorian Gray could be like a little queer one, you know, just a little bit flamboyant.
Oh, he's out of the picture now. Don't worry. Sorry, that was bad.
Is that it? Do you got anything else?
I think that's it. I think we're good.
Yeah. So, time to put on another pot and see y'all next week.
Matcha and Masala is produced and hosted by Sharmane Fury and Rhia Kaur.
This is a Main Hustle Media production in association with Virtual Reality Studios. All stories are researched to the best of our ability with information freely available to the public.
This podcast is intended for entertainment purposes, and due to the nature of true life crimes, some information remains inaccessible and new information can come to light after recording.